The International Monetary Fund has finally cleared the desperately needed $2.9 billion bailout package for Sri Lanka. But is the country's nightmare really over? Can economic aid be the silver bullet to bridge a yawning gap between public austerity measures and the state of the Sri Lankan economic mess?
To think Sri Lankans have had virtually nothing to celebrate this last year or so. The IMF's bailout package nod comes as a breather in more ways than one, at least the beginning of the end of the mayhem created by economic mismanagement and COVID-19. The Sri Lankan rupee and bonds were bullish. A nation that had tipped into its worst financial crisis in decades sees hope of pulling itself back from the brink.
Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt nation, therefore we can restart normal transactions.
$2.9 billion, that's what's been cleared for Sri Lanka by the IMF Executive Board. The first tranche is $330 million. What's more important though is the approval catalyzing additional external support. Some $3.75 billion from the World Bank, Asian Development Bank and other lenders. The President's office estimated access to some $7.5 billion in overall funding. The big question, will the IMF bailout be the silver bullet to end the Emerald Isles woes?
While the IMF agreement might give some confidence to the markets, in terms of ordinary people's lives, it makes no difference. In many parts of the country, people are actually only eating 1 or 2 meals a day. So relief to the people is the most important thing. And so in that sense, the IMF agreement really has not solved their problems.
How soon then before the benefits are felt on the ground, especially for people squeezed by soaring cost of living, high income tax rates and a 66% rise in power tariffs?
It must be spent to solve the country's problems. If they reduce the price of fuel and food items and give people some relief, then it's good.
The IMF doesn't mean that they are going to do the reforms. They will only provide the financial assistance. If our policymakers, if some of our key stakeholders are so reluctant to do the reforms, probably there will be an 18th and a 19th time also for the IMF. This is we have gone 16 times, so this is the 17th time. And if we, the main challenge would be the politicians and the policymakers so backward looking in terms of reforms even after the crisis broke out.
More than 1 year it's been of queues and power cuts extending to public anger and protest. The current IMF bailout is the 17th for Sri Lanka and the 3rd since its decades-old civil war ended in 2009. But experts warn that the worst is far from over. The gap between people's welfare and strong austerity and economics remains a big one.
The targets set by the IMF, such as a primary budget surplus. A primary budget surplus means that our revenue should be higher than our expenditure of the government. By next year, by 2024, impossible. This is Sri Lanka's 17th IMF agreement. And unless there is much more space given to Sri Lanka to be able to rebuild our economy while giving relief to the people, we might be again going to another IMF agreement. We might even default again on our debt.
The question rings again, is Sri Lanka's nightmare really over? Shaking off relapse fears remains distant yet. The IMF bailout package remains but a silver lining on a still dark cloud.